There's a saying, people don't fake depression, they fake being okay. Suicide was always off the table. That is never the option. He always looked out for other people and never wanted to be a burden to other people. So he just suffered in silence.
Mental health and grief. This episode today is a combination of the two. Jameson Arasi, who I sat down with in New York, discusses the loss of his brother around 19 months ago and how his brother took his own life. One of the most powerful parts of this episode was that he told me him and his family made a pact that no matter how bad it gets, taking your own life will not be an option, and unfortunately, Jameson's brother still made that decision. This was an emotional conversation, of course, but it was very, very insightful. You're going to hear Jameson speak, who's clearly very intelligent, really processes things, and I really admired the way he tries different things and explores his thoughts and perspectives and how he can live a better life and how he can be there for the people around him. So if you are someone that's struggling with mental health or you know someone, this may be a very profound episode. Will hopefully put you in a better place, make you see things a little bit differently, and really understand how fragile this life is. So I hope you enjoyed the episode. And before I stop talking, I hope you consider joining our Patreon. It's $5 a month, and it's a way to support the show as I continue my mission to do this full time. All of your support means the world. And I will stop talking. Enjoy the episode.
365 days ago, my family and I went to sleep with full hearts and full stomachs after an amazing Thanksgiving weekend together. The next day, our world changed forever. I debated for a very long time whether or not to share these personal videos. These are the last videos of my brother. 16 hours later, he took his own life. I'm not posting this for sympathy or attention. In fact, the comments are turned off. Instead, my hope is that you will share this video and this important message. My hope is that you'll pick up the phone, call, text those close to you, and simply check in, see how they're doing, and then ask how they're really doing. Life is hard. People struggle. Sometimes it's easy to spot, but many times you never even know. So do me a favor. Grab your phone, send a text, make a call. You may be glad that you did.
It's beautiful. And so was that the first post you publicly kind of made an announcement, if you will, in regards to, you put the phone in the pocket, it's all good, wherever you want.
Yeah.
So that was the first post that you made. Was it the first post you made, the first like public post, or what was that?
So when everything happened on November 26, 2022, all the emotions, the whirlwind, everything, I couldn't even deal with making a post and publicly announcing, again, the family, friends, close friends, they all found out, when, through the right channels at the right time, and then returning to work 10 days later, you just can't do it right when you're grieving at the beginning. It's already overwhelming. And then the last thing you want to do is engage and shock other people's worlds, because then you don't have the effort or energy level to engage in that. And then tell the same story over and over and over again, because it's exhausting. And then you're stuck because you're reliving it 100 times. So I waited, told people, but my first post was 9 weeks after. And I started by saying, 9 weeks ago, it's taken me 9 weeks to write these words. And then, the flood of messages and people sending their condolences and stuff. Fast forward to the post that I just shared with you before. That was the 1 year anniversary of my brother's passing. Thanksgiving weekend was coming up, and I knew that I had to make a post for myself, but also for my brother. And I owed it to my family, but also it's a major deal, especially once those who are grieving, you slowly realize their birthday, these certain days, the 1 year anniversary, these are monumental, major days, both good and bad, hard, difficult, but obviously you have to acknowledge and honor those days because they're important, So I was racking my brain thinking, what am I going to do? How can I make this not about me? I don't want to, a year later, oh, I'm so sorry for your loss, and have all, people coming to me and saying, I'm so sorry. I said, let me make a message that people can take from that, the post, and then call to action, send a text, make a phone call, ask people, because you just never know. So I was racking my brain, and I had just seen a video of the Norwich Soccer Club. It's a UK soccer football team, and they did a post for mental health, men's mental health awareness. I think it was Suicide Awareness Month, which is September, and it was a video that I watched and hit me like a ton of bricks. It broke down, and then stayed with me, and it was very important. So I'm racking my brain, and I was like, wait, in November, I that's the post. I have the videos. I was that video. So then I started writing, and I'm like, wow, if I do that, I can portray it in the same way. It's going to, at least send a good message to the followers that I had. Posted it, and then lo and behold, it exploded, and for all the right reasons. And like I said, I turned comments off because I didn't want, I'm so sorry for your loss. It wasn't about me and my loss. Yes, I was honoring my brother's, 1-year anniversary, but calling people to action and saying, you know what? Don't feel bad for me. I'm not a victim. Pick up the phone and do your part. Be the friend, be the brother, the sister, because it could be them. Mm-hmm. And again, it was, the response was overwhelming. And, within a couple of days, thousands of direct messages. And I was like, holy crap, I can, by sharing my experience, I can make an impact here.
Well, it's telling too, because when you make a post like that and you see the interactions, you see the engagement of strangers responding to a post revolving the loss of your own brother, it kind of shows a missing point in society, which is a big premise with this podcast, and that there are a lot of people that want to relate to that. You know what I mean? I'm not saying we can't, like, loss isn't equal in many senses, but there is a commonality in loss in many ways. So for seeing that response is a big tell in regards to, I think, how much people wanted that. It's how much it's needed, and how much this conversation truly is, I think, demanded in this society, which is why I think a post like that went so crazy, and why you're seeing this response like that, if that makes sense. But I do want to ask you, just to clarify, so it's been around, if you said November, so if November's coming up now, it's July, it'll be almost 2 years, it'll be 19 months, I think you said, since your brother took his own life.
Yes.
And just to clarify for the listeners again, he took his own life.
Right.
And so I want, that's another subject that I've had a few times. I think it's an important subject tied into, I've been wanting to speak to someone again in regards to sibling loss. It's something that my listeners have kind of specified that they wanted to listen to more. So I want to thank you for being here. Yeah. It's a delayed intro, and thank you. But in regards to, like, the words that you said in that post that you started the episode off with about, check in, text those people, reach out to the loved ones. Of course, that's I think a very common thought when it comes to grief. But I want to ask you, in regards to your brother taking his life and being so sudden, and you specifically saying those words to reach out, is that something you feel like you didn't do?
I think that you're just, hindsight's 2020, and in the aftermath, prior to that day, whenever it happened, and, you would talk, my family had been struck with, a close family friend growing up took her own life. So it was openly discussed, my parents and my siblings, about, we were young, I was 10, but we were made aware of, like, holy crap, like, that's heavy. And then my parents did a great job at that age of having an honest and open discussion. My younger sister took it very hard. She was a babysitter for us. So we had in the neighborhood, and we were very close at a young age. So the thing for me was that suicide was always off the table, no matter what. And that it goes for my immediate family, but then amongst the 4 siblings.
What do you mean off the table?
We always talked about, no matter what,
right?
No matter how bad, no matter what you did, no matter what, we will always be there to help fix and get you out of the situation, or just, that is never the option, So we had that agreement growing up, and, like, trust me, life is hard. It highs and lows, ups and downs, but that was always off the table because of our history with the subject and somebody close to us doing that. So for me, you know, to answer your question, it's I don't think that I lacked doing that, but I think we all life is fast, it moves quickly, and we all get caught up and we put things off when, you know, I'm not talking specifically for my brother. I'm talking about friends or people. Oh yeah, I'll get back to you. You know, in this world, distractions are right in always. You know, so I think for me it was like you just never know because one prior to that I would always say, oh, when people said there were no signs or there were no warning signs, I'd be like, yeah, whatever. Like, come on, of course there were. You know, depression, blah blah blah. But like I ate those words when it happened to me. So it literally scares you straight to the point of like, wow, it happened to me.
Mm.
And, you know, what I learned from that is people can hide a tremendous amount of pain. You know, there's a saying people don't fake depression, they fake being okay.
Mm.
And when people realize that, how many times are people faking just to struggle to get through the day, to play the character, to play the role, to appease the people around them, to, you know, do their obligations, go to work, be the father, be the friend, whoever, a colleague, you know, and just get when they're home, what's really going on inside, you know? So I learned quickly that people can hide because my brother hid this from everybody. You know, he was the life of the party. Everyone said, oh, you know, lit up a room, whatever. He always looked out for other people and never wanted to be a burden to other people. So he just suffered in silence. And it's hard because my family is very close. You know, my parents have been together almost 50 years. I've, you know, 3 siblings. We're all close in age, very awesome, amazing family. And for it to happen here to us, it just, again, you know, in the blink of an eye, everything changed.
For exclusive access to bonus content, new episodes, and more, check out our Patreon account for only $5 a month. Link is in the description.
Yeah, and that's the crazy part about it is like until it happens to you type shit. And I think a lot of people may notice someone's off, and it's hard to fathom that they would take it to that extreme, you know, until obviously it happens. And you said hindsight's 2020. So when you look back, it's like, oh, maybe there were signs, but it's a totally different ballgame when that happens. And then you look back, and like I said, hindsight 2020 is a saying for a reason. It's much
Yeah.
easier looking back. And then what is that juxtaposition of? I'm sure you've looked back for those signs in retrospect. So it's what is that? What does that pull out of you? What are you feeling when you look back at that? Do you feel guilt? Do you feel something?
Great question. You know, and it's something that immediate. What could I have done in the short term? You know, I became obsessed. I needed to know what did we miss. I'm his best friend. We're 18 months apart. We shared a room growing up. We lived together in multiple cities as adults. What did I miss? How did I let this happen under my watch? You know, again, you know, learning and about it, you read, you know, Harvard Medical Journal explaining how little we play. It's our ego. We how little we play in their actual decision, but we want to feel that we were, you know, involved in that decision.
Mhm.
However, when somebody is that low and depressed and um, it's all about them and it has nothing to do with us. But to your point, you know, I think um, I became obsessed with going through his phone, his iPad. What did I miss? What did I miss? And then I found it being counterproductive.
Right.
You know, obviously in the triage and the, you know, figuring out I was CSI. It had to be something bigger. He had to be, you know, there had to be a bigger plot story, a plot line for this, not just that he didn't want to go on anymore. And it was hard to grapple that. And I think for me, you know, it was consuming my energy. But then in therapy, I immediately started went to go into therapy and grief counseling. I meditate daily too, because I knew I needed help. I didn't know what was going on, but in those early days, I was like, I need to make sure that this, first off, I have help and guidance to damage control immediately, but also long term. You know, how is this going to affect me in my relationships, whether it's, you know, family dynamic, personal, romantic, whatever. But I knew I had to get that and not suppress that and address it head on. So in those therapy sessions, you know, I we started talking about again, in therapy, you can just go through the motions, and then are you actually implementing those practices when you leave there? Therapy is not going to miraculously cure you. It's going to give you the tools to help you navigate your new reality, but you have to do the work and you have to implement those and actually say something in therapy. You have to believe it and then convince yourself later on, because otherwise you're full of crap.
Right.
So for me, I was like, I had this revelation. I was like, I even to the point where I returned to work 10 days later, and I was working restaurants, and I would close the restaurant. And I found out at 3:23 p.m. on Saturday, November 26th, I got a text from my dad that said, call me, please, ASAP. I have horrible news to share. So I went and took that phone call. Well, I saw the text and I got off the restaurant floor, went in the office, shut the door, locked it, and made the phone call. And this is all on camera, the reaction because of security cameras.
Right.
So in the weeks later, when I returned to work, the restaurant's empty. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, close up, nobody's there, just me. And I would sit and contemplate and think like, holy crap, and try to process everything. And also go back to watching that video of me receiving the news. And I look at that, and in therapy, where it's, why did I do that? To punish myself? Why did I do that? To keep that connection? Is it the last? Sometimes you don't want to heal because that's the last connection to the loved one you lost. If that sounds, if that makes sense. So for me, with that, I'm stuck on purpose in my healing. So in the therapy, to answer the long answer to that question, I finally realized that if I keep looking back and dwelling on the what ifs and what happened, David, is the end result going to change?
Mm.
So I'm putting in so much energy, effort, literally driving myself crazy and stress induced, like thinking I'm going to uncover some mystery. But even if I did, it's not going to bring my brother back. So as soon as you realize that and that you're doing that and understand, like, okay, what's done is done. Now I got to focus on what's in front of me and baby steps. Where to that question, you can't dwell. Yeah, things happen, and I'm always going to have guilt and blame and what ifs. I still do, and but that you address it in therapy, and you get to a place, where I mean, I've told my therapist that I'm going to feel some responsibility. We progressed in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I shared this in one of my posts about believing it. It's not. It went from I feel responsible. His death is my responsibility. To 3 months in, it's not entirely my fault, or I am not entirely. And you slowly relinquish some sort of, because we should protect our loved ones. You know what I'm saying? So for me, I will take responsibility. But again, you have to slowly, tread those waters and deal with that belief, and then say it and actually believe it.
Yeah, and I think that's a double-edged sword too, because I think the dwelling on anything is not healthy in many ways, but I think there's a balancing act between dwelling and learning a lesson. And I'm not here to tell you what a lesson is in that an aspect, but I wonder, what do you think about not dwelling, but kind of digesting everything you did, and maybe in a way that you said was it's obviously not going to change the scenario, but it's specifically to someone that takes their life. And again, you also mentioned that it tends to not be the people around them, I guess, or can be implemented by the people around you, but it's ultimately that person's decision. So you release some of the blame. But what I mean when this horrible rant of a sentence that I'm trying to get out of my mouth right now is probably the Jim Bean I just had, ladies and gentlemen. But what I'm trying to say is that there's dwelling, but then there's learning lessons. So, like, at what point is the dwelling a lesson? You know what I mean? So it's like you stop dwelling, but like, how do you still apply the lesson from that dwelling? Because you don't want to like just completely forget about it and move on. Okay, that's what's done is done, which is I think fine. But then from putting something in the past, saying what's done is done, how do you pull the lesson from that if you're not dwelling on something and not
Right.
contemplating it?
So, again, when you make peace with that you can't change history, there's a little bit of a relief, I would say, a weight off your shoulders. I remember, it's funny you say that because I would be in these therapy sessions intense talking about this exact thing. And like you said, how do you take it from full blame and not dwelling to, okay, learn the lesson from it and then implement in your life so you can progress in your grief.
And specifically with you,
Yeah.
because it's like, or you or anyone that experienced someone that took their life, because that feels way more preventable than any other what other law besides, a situation of maybe driving a car, et cetera, et cetera. But like that's a scenario where the first thought is how could I've prevented it? Like my dad, like I mean, I'm not gonna jump on the plane and prevent the hijackers, but like you're in your situation, it has that innate thought of preventative measures, and then how much of that. I'm sorry if I cut you off there, by the
No, no,
way.
no.
I want to try to get it all out of here. That preventative measure must lead into your future of how can I prevent this in the future with family members or my loved ones, and it might become obsessive at that point. So is that the lesson?
I think for me, it was in those intense therapy sessions, there was always a time based, time's up. Even if you're having a crazy moment, of like, holy crap. And then, okay, back into the real world. And like, you're just, what the heck's going on? And for me, I realized early then that I needed to go sit with it and then really believe the first part of your question that I can't dwell on this anymore. I can't because I'll dwell on it forever. So go and actually accept the finality of the event. So I booked went to Costa Rica and sat on the beach with no agenda for a week plus and fully processed everything that I had done. So 5 months, 4.5, 5 months after it happened, and I've been in therapy, but I felt like I was not, I was stuck there because it was just like interrupted healing. So I went and I sat there and I processed it and came to the exactly what you're asking. I said, okay, it's done. My brother's gone. I can't do anything. I can't change history, despite as much as I obsess over it. This is actually unhealthy. Accepted that, going there, the intention of the trip was to um, accept it, the finality of it. But leaving, it's the lesson. I left there with hope. And I say hope in regards to I can still live a meaningful life. And this is a tragedy, but it's done. I can't erase the past. And coming back and understanding that and accepting that, was major for me. And coming back to, the lesson isn't there. It's accepting that this grief is going to be with me forever. I tell people like what's the biggest thing you learned right away is accept that this loss is with you forever and you will never get over it. And then people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I don't say it in a daunting way. I say it for me, when you accept that and say, I'm never going to get over this and it's forever, it kind of takes a little bit of pressure off. And I say that for not, you pressuring or your family or anybody, but on yourself, because you're like, if I have forever to figure this out, I don't have a deadline. You know what I'm saying? So for me, it was like, wow, okay, I don't have to figure this out and I don't have to progress in the stages and all these, which I hate later, we could talk about, these pop psychology terms. And I'm going to grieve with this forever. There's a poet, Donna Ashworth, and she says something, love came first is her poem. And there's a beautiful thing, a beautiful couple of lines there that say, she's not the monster she once was. Pull her a chair at the table. She lives with you now. Grief. On the days where your anger's high, remember who the grief represents. Remember why she came. Because once you accept that this is with me forever, I think it's less burdensome to be like, oh my God, why I'm stuck. I'm not healing. And it's just less daunting to tackle rather than I should be over it by now to I'm just going to get through today.
Mhm.
And then tomorrow we'll get through that day. And it's like, I have forever to figure it out, if that makes sense. So I came back with that mentality of like, okay, What's done is done. I can't dwell over the events.
Mhm.
That's history. It's always going to be on my mind. I'm always going to think about it. But the moving forward is this is with me forever, and get cozy and get comfortable with it.
I agree. I think grief is a scar, and it's like I broke my hand. I have a scar on my hand. I'm not obviously carrying a broken hand to grief, but it's like this scar is always with me, and
Yeah.
it's that grief is always with you, and it's not something I don't think you get over. I think you get better with it. I think you can improve with it. So I think when people say, "Oh, I'm never going to get over this," it's kind of said in a negative connotation, and what you were saying seems way more positive, and I like that because you don't have to. It's not like you grieve and then okay you're moving throw it in the past and it's done. No, it's going to be with you in many different ways, but it's going to evolve. It's going to change, and it's just a matter of what steps you take. I believe to take that action to improve. So I like that idea of not saying I'm going to get over it or it's just going to I got to get through. It's getting through it, not getting over it, but it's just something that you're going to have to learn to evolve with, in my opinion, and whatever that means to you personally. And there is no timeline, but my thought with the timeline is, it's not that you have to rush it or give yourself pressure to give yourself a deadline. But, at some point, I think there is a mix between taking the action and just saying, I it can make a change, whatever that change is. Like I think at some point, if whatever you're doing is not working, and I think you have to leave it to yourself. That's why the timetable is a tough discussion because, like, I'm not saying give yourself a timetable, but at some point, you got to make a decision. Be like, okay, it's time for me to make a change in whatever I'm doing. If you're not feeling any better or any progress throughout the time, but it's hard to also tell what is that time. So if
Right.
there's no timetable, it's like how long is what is it? Okay, I've been doing this for 2 years. Is that too long, or is that okay? You know what I mean? Like, so what is even though there's not going to be a timeline, like at what point is that decision to make a change in your actions or your methods to really get through it? Because you're not getting over it, like we said, but there's got to be a decision at some point to improve.
So I think a major you touched on is when you any traumatic event, any stored trauma. I mean, the most traumatic event is when we're born.
Mhm.
Any stored trauma, subconsciously or an experience or whatever, or the loss of my brother. If you don't address it and you suppress that grief, it's going to stay in your central nervous system,
Mhm.
and it's going to come out at some point. So you have to face that and understand, that or it becomes complicated grief or you stay stuck. Again, it's implementing action and you know where do you how do you heal? And again, you need support. Whether I'm very fortunate that I have an amazing family, I have friends that you lose a lot of friends with when someone dies because they can't, makes them face their own mortality. And that, oh my god, he lost his brother, I can't deal with this. So then, it makes them,
Mhm.
um, for them to stand with you in that pain, it's too much. So rather than be there, they ghost you and disappear. And then other people come and support you. But to that, I feel that then you need help to process. Grief is very, very complicated. It's the hardest thing. I'm almost 42 years old. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with in my entire life. Um, because of the layers and complexity of it. From physical, it affects your physical well-being. Literally, you can become sick. Your immune system, especially in those first 3 4 weeks, it's a triage. Your body is shocked, especially unnatural death, out of the natural order. If you lose a sibling or if you lose a partner or grandparents, okay, yeah. And all loss, I'm never going to compare loss, but those are, you need to deal with those, and for me, you need help guiding you through those complex emotions, and then not making progress, but just dealing with the stuff that you're dealing with alone with somebody else. And again, it goes back to with what therapy's goal is. It's not going to miraculously sit down, David, in this chair and you're healed. No, it's learning, discussing why am I feeling this way? And then giving tools to navigate that for when you go out into the real world. And then you can, it's literally a personal trainer. I equate it
Yeah.
to you have to literally, you can't just go to a personal trainer and okay, yeah, I'm ripped. You got to put in the reps and you got to put in the work and you have to implement and you have to be disciplined. But this is your life now and it's your new reality. So you have no other choice. Otherwise, you're going to spiral. And for me, that's where the decision comes in. And it goes to, something I think we talked about earlier, just off camera, just post traumatic growth. I hate that term. You can grow. I hate there's a bunch of, again, I'm not an expert. I just read a lot to understand for my benefit, and understand grief and how it affects the mind and body. And I have full respect for, psychology terms and all the medical professionals out there. I just have an issue when it's called post traumatic growth. You say, like, how do you become, the lesson and stuff. So for me, I think the term post traumatic growth, it depreciates what it actually, the growth. Because for me, and again, all loss is different. But when I look at that, logic says post traumatic growth. So growth is a positive. The definition of growth is a positive. And if you so the growth is a positive. So that means the death was a positive. And I will never look at my brother taking his own life as a positive, ever, regardless if it enacted changes in my behavior, life decisions, quitting my job, being more present. So for me, I propose, and I made a post about this to spark a discussion, because this is important, to create a discussion about this. It's post-traumatic perspective,
Mm.
because the perspective changes, but it's still on you, David, to go back to what we just talked about, to implement those changes, to heal, to do the work, okay, you want to, stop drinking, or you want to be the best, for your family or your kids. This job I hate and it's not serving me. And, you evaluate, it changes your perspective. And bunch of your episodes, you say you see the world through a different lens. Totally agree.
Mhm.
It's a different lens. And a lot of times, you know, it's just our lens gets tinted over time and jaded. And then when grief hits, it's holy crap. These are 2020 prescription glasses.
Mm.
You know what? I hate this job. I'm not doing this anymore. And you just changes your priorities and perspective overnight. So the perspective changes first. And then you still have to be disciplined and do the uncomfortable stuff and have those very difficult conversations with your therapist or somebody, your support system, and then go sit by yourself. And do you believe that? Like, that's a lot of work, man. That I trust me, I've done it, and I
It
do it every
sucks.
day.
Yeah, it's hard.
And it's hard because it's uncomfortable. So for me, that's positive though, because I'm in a place now where I can share and talk about my grief to help other people. But it took a lot of work. So for you to say that post traumatic growth, I'll never look at my brother's death as a positive. The death rattled my world, shook it. Holy crap, changed my perspective, but it depreciates the work that I put in to make the choice to be better and do this and do that and stop doing this, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. It's a choice, and I've used that gym analogy before because I think it's important. I think that's a perfect. It's obviously a physical comparison, but yeah, you have to put in the work, and I think it relates to anything we go through, whether it's grief, this, that, breakups, whatever the hell it is. It takes effort and a decision to do that, and it's often way more difficult than just being sad, in my opinion. I think staying in that complacent place that is miserable, depression, this, that. Sometimes it feels easier to stay there because it doesn't take any effort. You're just sitting there in misery, and sometimes it's oddly not comforting, but it's kind of uncomfortably comfortable, if that makes sense, because it's just easier to stay there. But I always find it fascinating, and you just made me think because where I'm at in my life after my experiences, my perspective has shifted so much, for the better. Again, I'm not making the loss of anything I've lost positive, but my perspective has shifted in so many ways that I think make me love harder. They make me appreciate so much more. But at the same time, as much as I feel like when people talk about loss and grief and they talk about, oh, my perspective on life change, it's often a positive remark, but it's also, oh, your perspective can change for the negative too. And especially in an experience like what you and your family went through, it can easily, like, perspective is always going to change, in my opinion, always, but it can go in either direction. So often you hear these conversations like, oh, my perspective changed. Like I just said, I love harder the XYZ. But there's the other side that people can say, oh, my perspective changed. Why this happened? What's the point of it all? I just lost my son, my brother, this or that. And it can go the other way.
Yeah.
So it's always, which I think is an easy direction to go, but it's just fascinating to me how and why some people go in one direction and the other more immediately, or they take X, Y, Z. I've seen plenty of people that have lost someone and never recovered. Their perspective shifted in a negative way and they never recovered.
We just met, but I don't see you as the victim. You don't play the victim. And I think you have a choice, and you can, again, don't get me wrong. I was like, holy crap, this is crap for a bit. And how did this happen? Don't feel sorry, feel bad for me, you know. But then you realize like that's not the way we're wired, that I'm wired. And people have it, you know, my dad always says somebody always has it worse than you. And be grateful for what's in front of you. And because you can get in that victim mentality, and that's a terrible cycle. And to that, you know, it's a perfect segue. There's something I hated, the term suicide survivor. I hate that, you know, where you talk about the growth or the victim kind of getting stuck. And for me, I could play, oh, I'm a suicide survivor, you know, and I wrote about this, and I say, to say that I'm a suicide survivor implies that I survived something, that my life was in danger at one point. My life was never in danger. I wasn't even there, you know? So I think it also depreciates real survivors, cancer survivors, people that literally defy death, you know, save that for them. Again, this is my opinion. If you relate or identify as a survivor of, you know, you lost a brother, a husband, wife, again, it's just my opinion. But to your point where you're saying you have a choice to heal and put in the work and understand this new outlook on life. And this is my new reality that I got to deal with. And nobody's coming to save me. And nobody's coming, especially the person you lost, is never going to be back in this life. So you have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And it just takes time and experience, and literally just be patient with yourself, I think, and give yourself grace, because it doesn't happen overnight. You know, so for me, it was suicide survivor. Like, I'm not a survivor. I didn't survive anything. I'm not a victim, but that's just the way I am.
Yeah.
You
It's a
know,
massive
and
shift.
yeah, and it's like, what are you talking about? I feel uncomfortable calling me that. You know, so for me, it was uh with I went the other way. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And that's the difference. That's the point of these conversations. I think when some people might get their panties in a ruffle, what's the saying?
panties in a bunch.
Panties in a bunch for saying something that they don't
Why
agree
are we
with.
talking about panties?
I mean, hey, come on. Now I just ruined the whole fucking conversation. Everything was so deep and emotional, and I just mentioned panties. Everyone kind of can get rubbed the wrong way when I think you may say something like that, but I'm in the same boat, not per se the exact experience, of course, but just the way we handle things. Everyone handles things differently and has certain perspectives, and I don't see it as a victimhood. Like, things happen to you, things happen in our lives, and the way I see it, it's like, okay, it could be a massive setback. Okay, I might have just dropped back 4 pegs, and now life is harder at this point. But it's not like I just don't see things. Even if someone fucks me over, excuse my French, it's like, yes, they just screwed me over, but it's like, okay, now I have a little bit of a setback. I got to figure it out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's my personal mentality. And I feel like that's how you maybe just related to
Every
may
single
relate.
person's different. Again, you know, like I said, it's just that was you're asking about, you know, the how do you make that choice? And again, takes longer for other people.
That's
And for
fine.
me, I mean,
That's
you know,
fine.
I learned recently because I wanted to continue to learn, and where I get inspiration for a lot of my posts, it's about grief as a form of learning. You know, why does it take so much longer for people? Like, why am I not progressing? And you get in that mentality because you're literally rewiring the brain.
Mhm.
You know, and I read a bunch of stuff on the neurology of it and the neuroscience behind it, of everything you've been used to and accustomed to in your life. You know, the same thing. The humans are hardwired to form bonds of attachment, and the same way that you create maps in your mind to allow your wife to go to work, your husband, whoever, to go to work and not worry the whole time, and no, they'll come back. It's because you've created that routine and that experience. and they're going to come back. So imagine, regardless of the loss, if it's a sibling, for me, it was, 40 years. So everything that I knew, he was there. So I would always expect. And for that, you have to literally rewire the brain. It's not just a simple iOS update. It's literally an operating system install of your new reality, and that
Yeah.
takes time.
I agree, and especially, and I think going back to the way everyone handles things differently. It's a rewiring, and most people are wired differently. So it's
Yeah.
like based on everyone has such different circumstances. Like when it comes to anything in life, it's just like Shrek says, it's like an onion. There's just layers to everyone's life. And I feel like we're all these big fat onions and just have all different layers of our life. And we've been wired differently based on experiences, relationships, timing, family dynamics. And all that jumbled together makes every experience of grief differently, especially within families. Like you see brother, sister, parents, everyone handles it so differently. And it's just, we're just all pre-wired differently. I think, of course, nature versus nurture. I think there are hardwired stuff like evolutionary stuff that we just have inside us, but then there's this experiential wiring that we all experience that therefore makes our grief experience different for whatever reason. And so that's why I think you have to give yourself grace in the timing of it. But at some point, you do have to be honest with yourself and really make that decision to make a difference. Like we said, make a change and make the effort to get out of there.
And
If you know
yeah,
what I mean?
totally agree. And to your point, no two people are going to grieve the person the same way. It's just you're it's all relative to the relationship you have with that person.
Right.
Like my parents aren't going to grieve the same way my brother was 18 months apart. It's just so you trying to give a manual or blueprint, it's hard to, because you can't predict or prescribe something because it worked for you, maybe, but you have to speak generally in that, because people get so caught up in, okay, it worked for David, so it's got to work for me.
Right.
But it's all relative, I think.
Yeah, I think you just gotta try to. It's like anything in life. You gotta try different things. Like maybe therapy is good for you, maybe it's not. Maybe doing some kind of artwork is good for you, maybe it's not. Maybe this, that, yeah, whatever it is. I think it does take experimenting and trying and effort. It takes effort. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of effort. And again, I think it's much harder to make that effort and take those strides to improve whatever that is. But you do got to give yourself grace with a blend of a little bit of not aggression is the right word, but a little bit of let's go get it and let's okay. I feel like me personally, I do. I feel like I'm emotionally aware in many ways, and I'm understand the sensitivity of talking about it. That's what this whole podcast is. But it is at some point. It's like, all right, David, get off your ass and stop being a bitch. At the same time, it's like, get up and go. Like, okay, you had your moments of feeling it, this, that, and the other, which is very important. Like you said earlier in the podcast, I think don't step outside the door to do this or do that. Don't distract yourself. You got to really just sit in it and allow your feelings to just get out. Whatever that is. If it's sit, like when I went through XYZ, I would, without getting specific, I would literally sometimes just sit there and just, if I'm feeling down, I wouldn't go to the TV. I wouldn't try to eat something. I just literally sit there and just feel it. And I think that's like, it's like deflating a balloon. You got to sometimes just truly let it out. But at some point, you got to stop feeling bad for yourself. And this may come off as insensitive at some point. I'm not saying first couple weeks, a year, whatever it takes, but at some point you got to make a decision and get off your ass and do something.
For sure.
And it's a hard pill to swallow, especially as people that are listening. If you might be in the grief right now, I'm not saying it's right for you right now. I'm not saying that, but at some point, if you got to make a decision
And honor those moments when they do come.
Yeah.
Because, you're talking, for me, it's 19 months. I still get choked up. Something that will remind me, again, it's not the intense, heavy and sadness and dread it once was, but now it's, a memory, and it's more of a aching, like nostalgia or a homesick for that person that will trigger you and upset you, and you allow yourself to feel it in the moment. I used to be so scared. Oh my God, I can't break down in public. Now I don't give a shit. If I'm crying, understand who these tears represent. We're good.
Yeah, like,
And it's
I like that.
so for me, it's, they, I wrote about recently, I went to talk about something else, and the camera's rolling, and I needed a minute to collect myself, because again, this is what I'm talking about, and it set me off, and I went to go delete that video, and then I said, wait, okay, no, that I'm a hypocrite if I delete that. I'm telling people to feel it and process it. Let these griefy moments happen. let the feelings go, and then wipe the tears. Here we go. So it's so important to do that and understand that. And I think let remind yourself always when you're getting, oh my God, I'm weepy and I'm having a day, especially early on. Those tears represent that person. So do not be embarrassed to, or oh my God, people are watching. You know what? This is what happened to me. I'm processing it. That's the healthiest thing you can do
Mhm.
is feel it in the moment. The Tyler Perry on Oprah, that interview where he with the woman, and he said, no, 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 no. When grief shows up, let it show up,
Mhm.
because if you suppress it, it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Suppress it, that's going to add up negatively too. So let the moment pass. Washington Irving, the author, those tears are not a sign of weakness. They are your unspeakable love. They speak more eloquently than 10,000 tongues,
Mhm.
and they represent grief and endless love. That's the shift, I think, when you get to that place. You're just like, oh man, you son of a bitch.
Yeah, and
And
feeling
then you feel it, and then you're just like, now it's okay.
Yeah, and that's a big deal. I mean, think about how many times, if anyone listening, how many times have you had a good cry? It's like there's a physical release. I think that is very important too. It's not just contemplating, but that the psychosomatic, that mind body connection, that physical. That's why. I mean, how many times have you talked to someone and they're going through it and you let them go through it, and then all of a sudden, 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever the hour, and you kind of do feel like, whew. I feel better at least for this moment. And then I think the more you do that, the more you do let it out, even physically, especially it kind of like starts adding up. And then after some time, you're like, okay, a year goes by. It's like, I kind of feel, I do feel a little bit better right now.
To
And
beat a
it's,
dead horse, the gym analogy, you're running a mile, and then
yeah,
now all of a sudden I can do 7 miles. Like that moment doesn't crush me. It
yeah.
doesn't cripple me, debilitate
But
me.
to get to that
It's
7 miles, it's like, okay, now I just ran 1.2
how
mile,
many in
1.2
between?
miles.
Exactly.
And then some days, like, I'm exhausted. I can only run a half a mile today. And that's okay. And okay, next day, go get back at it. It's like, so it's a
Exactly.
little bit of back and forth. It's like that graph people see about like, how do you show success on a graph? And then when it's zoomed out, it looks like a straight, like a 45-degree angle upwards. But when you zoom in, it's like squiggly lines up and down. I think that as long as you're making the effort and you're going to have your bad days, and that's cool. To me, that's like, it's okay to have those bad days. Like it's okay if you guys sit on the couch, fucking watch whatever stupid little reality show you want to watch. Let do that, but don't do it all. You got at some point you got to next day get up and do it,
Yeah.
and give yourself grace. Like I said, it's very important. But that physical release, I think, is huge.
And when you think big picture, okay, this isn't a flu I'm getting over or COVID or whatever. Like this is doing the work and dealing with the grief in front of us. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be waiting for you. So you distract yourself, you do this, understanding that you have to do that is only going to let you look in the mirror and say, you know what? I need to deal with this now. So
Mhm.
for the rest of my life, like 10 years, 20 years, like this is my new life. Nothing is coming to press reset or, hey, we're going back to the day before and there's no Groundhog Day. There's not.
Can't restart the computer.
There isn't. So the longer you put something off, that I mean, what's more important than your well-being for the rest of your life? I think when you think, okay, let me really sit and be like, why am I avoiding it? Then you have some other issues, and then you figure out why you're avoiding it. But you have to deal with it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think some people don't know how to deal with it. I just think this day and age, there's so many outlets to figure that out. And that's what I'm hoping this podcast is discussions with people like you to offer what's worked for you. And like it might not be for everyone, but try different things. And again, it's okay if you don't feel like you can do it right now, but at some point, at some point you have to get up and just do something, whatever that may be. I don't have the answer for you. Well, I think hopefully some of the things you said are just getting people's brains churning to do that. But again, it's I guess I've said a million times in this podcast, easier said than done, but I think everything is easier said than done. So it's like I don't know, it's not one shoe fits all, but at some point it's all a choice. I think the scary part about saying that for some people is it puts the responsibility on you.
Yeah.
And I think some people don't want that. But at the end of the day, I truly believe everything is a choice, and things happen around in our life, which makes it harder. And like I said, it's a setback, and you're going to be behind the starting line. But from that point on, it's always a choice. I think there's always a choice, and it's a response to what life throws at us.
Yeah, and I think, well said. I couldn't agree more, and I think, it's you hate to say, "Oh, if you know, you know," but once it happens to you, then everything you just said makes sense.
Mhm.
For me, the big thing for me that I still deal with, and, is what is I learned now called non-finite grief. You talk about sibling loss. Like, you think your siblings are there from the beginning,
Right.
and you think everything I imagined in my future, from when I was 3 in my first memory, to teenage years, adolescent, everything, to thinking you're going to get old and chill and hang, and my brother was going to be the best man at my wedding, and you know um, business partners, and just everything in my future that I imagined. By default, your siblings are there, right? I
Mhm.
mean, even just visiting your families, and then you're going to have kids, and I see my parents, and they're around their siblings, and I've been very fortunate. We have big Italian, Irish families with siblings, and we all showed up for each other. So it's, of course, I'm going to think that my sisters are going to be there, my brother will be there, and accepting that he won't, and that's no longer a possibility, has been the hardest thing that I've had to deal with. And from a family unit, when you talk about earlier about sibling, what specifically about sibling, it's very, very hard. And that can be, non-finite grief can be a divorce. It can be an athlete with a career-ending injury, catastrophic traumatic event that is going to change your trajectory or your future. So for the rest of your life, for me, it's accepting that, um, and realizing it's your imaginary future dissolved, right?
Mhm.
Like that.
I like the imaginary future.
And it's everything you imagine, though.
Yeah.
Think about it, for and it can
Future is
go up.
imaginary for the most part.
Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
what you're used to and what you think, and why would you not until it happens?
Yeah, I think
And
that's the point and reflection of these conversations is because it's not a contemplation of being constant. There's what I'm going to cut off what I was just
yeah,
saying to compare something I saw recently. There was a post or someone said, I lost someone or there was grief, and now I'm constantly worried about losing in the future. And it's like, okay, I see there's two paths. I think there's the path of fear for having experienced a traumatic experience and loss in this particular conversation, or there's the path of gratitude. I'm not saying I think give yourself some grace on which path you're going to go on. But at this point in my life, in my perspective, I have the path of gratitude. So yes, I lost my father when I was younger, and there's been plenty of times where I was like more fearful of losing my mom, my sisters now because I was like, oh my god, this happened. This is real. This actually happened to me.
anticipatory grief.
Anticipatory grief,
Yeah.
and now you because you experienced this loss, you may be more worried about losing
Well, you're
someone.
fragile now.
You're fragile now. You experienced it, but also then there's other path of gratitude. Okay, now I'm more aware of what's in front of me. I'm more aware of this life. So I'm gonna love harder. I'm going to be more grateful of the present. And there are those two paths. And it's like that again, like both of them go back to a choice.
It's the
It goes
perspective.
back to a choice.
It's the perspective. It woke you up.
But the choice is hard to like accept. I think everything you're saying there is that there's a acceptance gets thrown around a lot. And I'm not saying you just make a choice. I'm gonna choose gratitude. And that's it.
No, no,
No,
no,
it's
no.
like it's a choice to do the work to implement that choice, if that makes
I
sense.
couldn't even look at a photo of my brother for 6 months, and he was my best friend, and I couldn't even look because of the guilt and what it did to me.
Mm.
So that's how intense that was. Now I look at it, and there's a mindset shift, and there's no timeline for it. It's with the healing, with dealing with that dread.
With those reps.
Exactly. And it's that dread to get to a place of, okay, it's not the heaviness and dread that it once was. It's a place of gratitude for the relationship that I had with my brother
Mhm.
and the life I got to be a part of, so that's a shift too,
Yeah.
where um
Oh man, it's all a shift. Everything's
yeah,
a fucking shift. It's like I don't know what any of this shit is. I don't know. I don't know. I think I was talking to someone about there's a song by the Bleachers with Bruce Springsteen called Chinatown, China Girl, Chinatown I think it is, and one of the lyrics was, I have nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it just sparked me like emotions out of me. So something I love to chase every feeling, and I feel like having felt such deep feelings from some of the experiences we both have gone through, like that, it makes me want to feel everything. As weird as that sounds, and it's like I'm not saying I'm not chasing bad feelings, but this is the ride we're on. This life that we live, this is the roller coaster we're on. We had no choice to be here. Maybe some people have had on my podcast have near death experiences. Say we had a choice. I don't have to talk to myself and whatever happens and figure out why I made this choice. But it's like this is where we are. This is where we are. So we got to let's just feel it all. Let's just feel it all. Let's take this ride because we have no choice. But there's a lot of good shit out there. There's a lot to enjoy despite the chaos and the depression and all that stuff. There is a lot of beauty in this world that we can choose to see. But in order to see that, we have to make a decision and we have to put in the work.
Totally agree. And
Yeah.
for you, I think to touch on what you said earlier about uh, what is it? Oh, it's I think that when you experience I don't know about you, but it unlocks when you experience loss, major loss, life-changing loss. I think you become hypersensitive to other people who are struggling. It I
Mhm.
for me, I
Yeah.
I liken it to it unlocks an empathy chamber. Literally that even no matter how empathetic you were prior, like it literally you feel and you can see around and just
I agree.
understand the littlest thing can help somebody.
Yes.
Just compliment somebody in a respectful way.
Mhm.
Just you never know what all the cliches. There's a lot of cliches out there that are cliches for a reason, but there's a lot of cliches that, you never know everyone's fighting a battle or you never know the what kindness can do to somebody in that moment. And just being aware and present in the situation, no matter where you are, whether you're having it with friends or family or, I spend a lot of times with my nieces and nephews and being aware around you. How can I help other people, or make things lighter for others? I think you just realize, holy shit, this is heavy stuff. And this person's worrying about something that's so crazy. Like, just take a deep breath. Everything's going to be okay. Because we've both been, it can't get worse than where we've been. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
and I heard someone the other day, one of my buddies was like, it's like stay positive till we're screwed. It's like it's true. It's like to stay positive, because I related to that in regards to saying everything's gonna be okay, which I believe. But at the same time, it's like just worry doesn't do anything, and it's hard to control that. It takes discipline, it takes time. I still worry about things, but I'm better at controlling it now. It's like let's just stay positive and trust that it's gonna work out until we're fucked. Because it's like then when you are, just you figure it out.
Right.
I think humans have a great, amazing capacity to figure things out when things happen to you. And at the time you get scared of things, and in the moment you're so confused, but like give it time. I truly believe in the human being that no matter who you are, you can figure it out in whatever way you gotta do it. And I don't know what the hell that means, but I think we have like a couple minutes left. So
Yeah.
I
No,
want
just to finish what you said, that's a mindset for the individual. But when you talk about being positive for supporting somebody that has lost somebody, the one of my favorite quotes is saying in hard times, urging people to be positive doesn't boost their resilience. It actually denies their reality.
Mm,
So support them by acknowledging their pain without trying to fix it.
love that.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, don't go. You say be positive for the individual.
Mhm.
Totally agree. You have to. What what's the other side?
Mm.
Being pessimistic, you have to be the optimist. But when you're going to support somebody, telling somebody who's literally in the shit, hey, everything happens for a reason, or cliches,
Yeah,
diminish your grief, and unknowingly. Or hey, everything's gonna be okay. What are you talking
it's
about? My
hard.
life, everything's different. So when you they don't need a rah-rah coach.
Mhm.
They just need support there to listen. You don't have to say, I mean, I talk all the time about there's no one right thing to say, but there's plenty of wrong things to say.
100%. I'm good. I sometimes just like to hug people, and I'm like more
Just
physical
be there and
sometimes.
listen.
Yeah, because I like that too, because it's easier to screw things up if you say too much. But it depends. Some people receive information different. Some people want that. I don't know. It's like everyone needs different things. So it's like,
Exactly.
but say less sometimes until some people tell you what to do. And then if
Yeah.
you are going through it, it's okay to express what you need because some people don't know what you need. But James, I really want to thank you for stepping up and meeting me in New York City and just never meeting me and shaking my hand and doing this podcast. It really means a lot. This is a very important conversation in many ways. And I think you've had some incredible insights through your experience. It's been less than 2 years, so I commend you on your journey. It seems like you're in a very good direction. And I hope you guys listening learn something from this episode. Before we get out of here, if you have any quick last words in regards to how people can find you and whatnot,
Yeah.
please drop it now.
My Instagram is at Jameson Arasi. And I really appreciate you having me on here. Until it happens, until grief shows up at your doorstep, you don't realize how unprepared we are. So I commend you and what you're providing a platform, using your platform to talk about the hard things. It makes a difference. Trust me when I say, and it's a hard, we talked earlier off camera about it. It's not an easy niche or subject. People don't like to talk about death, but that's usually when they want to talk about it, it's already too late.
Yeah.
So you using your platform, talking about the hard conversations, raising awareness, just how we can help each other. It's incredible. And, it's a privilege to be here. So thank you so much.
I appreciate it. And everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed that episode because that was awesome. The Jim Beam was okay, but the conversation was better. Until next time, guys. And by the way, the last plug, horrible transition. If you listen to the podcast and you like it, I get thousands of downloads, but I don't have thousands of reviews. Write me a damn review if you like the show. All right, peace out. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Dead Talks. Please do not forget to hit the subscribe button and also the notification bell. That'll give you updates as to when we post a new video, more episodes, and more content in general. We are streaming on all the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and all that. And also find us on Instagram at Dead Talks Podcast or www.deadtalks.net. Thank you so much.